She was captured, trained to be a spy, and sent into American field hospitals. Then she chose to heal the very soldiers she was ordered to betray. A professor's daughter with perfect English, taught to draw secrets out of medicated wounded men, became the quiet hand that stopped bleeding and held frightened boys as they died. Her handlers promised safety for her family in return for intelligence. Her American commanders called her indispensable. Enemy couriers started leaving photographs of her grandmother as a warning. Counterintelligence began to circle. An assassin has been ordered to make a death look like an accident. Every bandage she ties saves a stranger and raises the price on her family's head. She's living on a razor edge between two armies who both want her silence. How long can one woman choose mercy in a war that counts every life? And who will decide whether she lives or dies for that choice? The professor's daughter came home from Seoul National University on June 23, 1950, carrying textbooks about English Romantic poetry. 2 days later, North Korean tanks rolled through the city streets, and those books became evidence of collaboration with Western imperialism. Her name was Park Min-ji, though that detail would be erased from every official record. 22 years old, fluent in English because her father had studied at Columbia before the war. She'd memorized entire Shakespeare sonnets and could discuss Wordsworth's theory of memory with the kind of passion that made her professors predict a brilliant academic career. The North Korean intelligence officer who found her file predicted something different. Captain Ri Sung-ho didn't see a literature student. He saw a weapon that spoke perfect English, understood American cultural references, and possessed the kind of gentle demeanor that made wounded soldiers trust her immediately. He saw someone who could walk into any American field hospital and become invisible. Just another helpful Korean civilian trying to survive the occupation. The math was brutal and simple. By July 1950, American casualties were mounting at rates that shocked Pentagon planners. The Pusan perimeter was bleeding men faster than replacement units could arrive. Field hospitals were desperate for anyone who could translate, assist with basic medical tasks, or just hold down a screaming soldier while medics worked. Communist intelligence understood what desperation creates. Security gaps you could drive a tank through. Captain Ri had spent 3 years in Soviet intelligence schools, learning how to exploit exactly these vulnerabilities. His specialty was what the Russians called humanitarian infiltration, placing agents in positions where American kindness became their greatest weakness. Wounded soldiers trusted nurses. Hungry orphans trusted relief workers. And traumatized GIs recovering from combat trusted pretty Korean women who spoke English and brought them water. The interrogation room in occupied Seoul stank of mildew and fear. Min-ji sat across from Captain Ri while he laid out photographs of her family, her mother, her younger brother, her father, who'd made the fatal mistake of teaching American literature at a university the communists now controlled. "Your skills belong to the Korean People's Army now," Ri said in Korean, his voice carrying the flat certainty of a man who had delivered this speech before. "You will be trained as a medical intelligence operative. You will assist in American medical facilities. You will listen. You will remember. You will report." He slid another photograph across the table. It showed the interior of what Americans called a MASH unit, Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. Wounded soldiers on gurneys, medics working frantically, Korean civilians carrying supplies. "You see how they trust these helpers?" Ri tapped the photo. American security is focused on preventing armed infiltration. They screen for weapons and saboteurs. They do not screen for a quiet woman who changes bandages and speaks their language. You will be invisible to them. Min-ji stared at the photograph, her mind racing through possibilities that all ended the same way. Refusing meant her family disappeared. Cooperating meant betraying soldiers who'd done nothing to her. There was no third option being offered. "What would I be looking for?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Ri's expression didn't change. Troop movements, unit designations, officer names and ranks, equipment losses, upcoming operations, morale assessments. Americans talk freely around medical staff, especially when medicated, especially when they think you're too simple to understand the significance of what they're saying. He pulled out a small notebook filled with dense Russian text. You'll attend a training course, 2 weeks. You'll learn basic field medicine, enough to be useful, but not enough to actually save lives independently. You'll learn which medications make patients talkative. You'll learn memory techniques for retaining verbal intelligence. You'll learn how to hide written notes in medical supplies. The specific details made it real in a way the photographs hadn't. This wasn't theoretical. There was an entire system designed to turn people like her into intelligence assets. How many others? Minji asked. That's not your concern. Ri closed the notebook. But I'll tell you this. By the end of this year, we'll have over 300 female operatives working in or near American medical facilities across Korea. The Americans need medical help too desperately to properly screen everyone. Their compassion is our tactical advantage. 300. The number hit like a physical blow. This wasn't an isolated operation. This was industrial-scale intelligence gathering disguised as humanitarian assistance. Ri stood, signaling the interrogation was ending. You report to the training facility tomorrow at dawn. Your family remains safe as long as you prove useful. Remember, information extracted from a trusting patient is worth more than a dozen reconnaissance patrols. He paused at the door, his final words carrying the weight of absolute authority. You will not fail. The training facility was hidden in a converted school outside Pyongyang. 23 women sat in the classroom where children had once learned mathematics. Now they learned how to fake empathy while extracting military intelligence. The instructor was a woman in her 40s who'd trained with Soviet intelligence in Moscow. She spoke Korean with a slight Russian accent and carried herself with the dead-eyed efficiency of someone who'd stopped seeing other humans as anything but operational assets. Lesson 1, she announced on the first morning. Trust is a commodity you manufacture, not something you feel. The wounded American soldier is not a person. He is a source. Your job is to open that source and extract its contents. She demonstrated on a training dummy, showing them where to place hands for maximum patient comfort, how to adjust morphine drips to keep soldiers conscious but pliable, which questions seemed innocent but revealed tactical information. Never ask direct questions about military operations, the instructor explained. Instead, ask about home. Ask about their families. Americans love talking about themselves. A soldier who tells you about his farm in Iowa will mention his unit designation without thinking. A Marine who describes his girlfriend will reference his division's recent movements. You're not interrogating. You're having a conversation. The students practiced on each other, role-playing wounded soldiers and sympathetic nurses. Minji discovered she was naturally good at it, which made her feel sick. Her literature training had taught her to read emotional subtext, to understand what people meant versus what they said. Now, those skills were being weaponized. You will work in shifts, the instructor continued. Real medical facilities operate around the clock. This provides natural cover for memory consolidation. After each shift, you'll record everything significant you heard. Troop designations, equipment serial numbers, officer names, casualty figures, operational timelines, anything that helps build our intelligence picture of American force disposition. She pulled out actual morphine syrettes stolen from captured American supplies. These are your tools. The Americans are generous with pain medication, much more so than our forces. This works to your advantage. A soldier on morphine talks more freely, but too much morphine and he becomes incoherent. You need to find the balance. The training included a field exercise that Minji would remember for the rest of her life. They brought in an actual American POW, a young corporal from the 24th Infantry Division captured during the North Korean advance. He'd been wounded in the leg, not severely, but enough to require medical attention. Practice on him, the instructor ordered. The corporal was terrified, barely coherent. He couldn't have been older than 19. When Minji approached with bandages, speaking gentle English, his whole body relaxed with desperate relief. You speak English, he gasped. "Oh God, you speak English. I didn't think anyone here." "I'm going to help you," Minji said, and hated how easily the lie came out. "Can you tell me your name?" "Daniels, Jimmy Daniels, from Tennessee." "Is this a hospital? Are you a nurse?" She cleaned his wound while he talked. About Tennessee, about his mother, about his unit, the 3rd Battalion, 19th Infantry Regiment, about how they'd been overrun near Taejon, about the lieutenant who'd ordered them to fall back, about the specific route they'd taken during retreat. Every word was actionable intelligence. Every detail helped enemy commanders understand American force disposition, leadership decisions, unit cohesion. When she finished, the instructor pulled her aside. "Excellent work. He gave you everything we needed. Unit designation, commander names, retreat routes, estimated force strength, all because you smiled and cleaned his wound." Minji felt something break inside her. "What happens to him now?" "That's not your concern." The instructor's expression was flat. "Your concern is replicating this performance with every American soldier you encounter. Remember, you're not torturing him. You're not even threatening him. You're simply being kind. And he's betraying his country because of that kindness." The final briefing came from Captain Rhee himself. He stood before the graduating class of intelligence operatives, outlining their deployment. "The Americans are establishing a network of mobile army surgical hospitals along their defensive lines. These facilities are chronically understaffed. They need translators, medical assistants, supply handlers. Local Korean civilians are being hired with minimal security screening because the Americans are desperate for help." He displayed a map showing MASH unit locations. "You'll be inserted into different facilities based on your language skills and medical training. Your cover story is simple. You're a South Korean civilian displaced by the war, looking for work and safety. The Americans want to believe they're helping you. Let them believe it." Rhee's eyes scanned the classroom. "Some of you will be discovered. Some of you will fail. If captured by American counterintelligence, you know nothing. You're a simple civilian who was coerced by the North. Play helpless. Cry if necessary. Americans are reluctant to execute women, especially ones who claim victimhood." He paused, letting that sink in. "But if you're discovered by our own security forces and found to be withholding intelligence or sympathizing with the enemy, there will be no mercy. Your families depend on your loyalty. Remember that every time you feel compassion for a wounded American soldier." Minji received her assignment that evening. MASH 85-5, operating near the Pusan perimeter. She'd be inserted as a displaced civilian seeking work. Her handler would make contact every 72 hours through a supply courier. Her job was to listen, remember, and report. The final piece of equipment they gave her was a small vial of clear liquid, sodium pentothal, the instructor explained. "Truth serum if you identify a high-value target, a major, a colonel, anyone with significant operational knowledge, you can add this to their morphine drip to make them more talkative." The classroom had no windows. That was the first thing Minji noticed when they escorted her into the converted warehouse outside Pyongyang. 23 other women sat on wooden benches, their faces hollow with the same coercion that brought her here. The instructor, a thin man with surgical scars on his hands, began his lecture by crushing a morphine syringe between his fingers. "You are not learning to heal," he said. "You are learning to harvest." The curriculum was methodical, each day built on the last, transforming medical knowledge into intelligence tradecraft. They learned that a wounded soldier given morphine didn't just feel less pain, he also felt less caution. The sweet spot was 8 to 10 milligrams, enough to dull the edge of agony, not enough to render him incoherent. At that precise dosage, a 19-year-old farm boy from Iowa would tell you anything if you held his hand and called him brave. "Americans trust their medics absolutely," the instructor explained, demonstrating on a practice dummy. "They have been conditioned to see medical personnel as neutral, as sacred. This is their fatal weakness. Minji watched him demonstrate the proper technique for cleaning a wound. Not for healing, but for prolonging the conversation. Make it hurt just enough that he needs comfort. Ask gentle questions between bandages. Where is your unit stationed? What's your sergeant's name? How many tanks did you see yesterday? The woman beside her vomited into a bucket. The guards didn't even look up. By the second week, they were practicing on actual prisoners. American POWs, wounded and terrified, were brought into the training facility under the pretense of receiving medical treatment. Minji was assigned to a corporal from the 24th Infantry Division named Jimmy Daniels. His shoulder was infected, fever bright and weeping pus. She cleaned the wound with actual care, unable to stop her hands from being gentle, even as her instructors watched. Daniels looked at her with such gratitude it made her stomach turn. "You speak English real good," he mumbled through his fever. "Where'd you learn?" "University," she said softly, applying antiseptic. "I studied literature." "No kidding. I was going to study engineering after the war." He winced as she pressed too hard. Sorry, you're doing great. It's just, we got hit so hard at Taejon. Whole company scattered. Don't even know where my lieutenant is." The information flowed out of him like the infection from his wound. Unit designations, officer names, the exact location where his battalion had regrouped after the retreat. Minji memorized every word while hating herself for listening. That night, she wrote her first intelligence report. Captain Ri Sung-ho read it with visible satisfaction. "Excellent detail," he said. "This confirms what our reconnaissance suspected. The 24th Infantry Division is in complete disarray near Taejon." 3 days later, she overheard guards discussing a successful ambush. American casualties, 47 dead, 122 wounded. She wondered how many had been from the information she'd extracted from a boy who trusted her because she'd cleaned his wound. The other women in training weren't all monsters. They were daughters and sisters, students and teachers, each one coerced by threats so specific they couldn't be ignored. One woman's mother was in a labor camp. Another's husband was a political prisoner. They traded these facts in whispers after lights out, their shared guilt the only bond they were permitted. "They're making us into something worse than soldiers," one woman said in the darkness. "Soldiers kill cleanly. We kill with kindness." By the end of the second week, Captain Ri assembled all 24 women in the windowless classroom. He produced a chart showing the deployment of communist intelligence assets across the Korean peninsula. "We currently have 73 female operatives working inside American medical facilities," he announced. "By spring, that number will exceed 300. The Americans are so desperate for medical assistance, they'll accept anyone who can speak English and hold a bandage. Their background checks are cursory at best." He pointed to a map dotted with red circles. Each one represented a MASH unit or field hospital. "You will be inserted as displaced South Korean civilians, refugees fleeing the fighting. They expect to see you. The roads are full of people like you. You will cry about lost families. You will beg for any work, any shelter, and when they give it to you out of the kindness of their American hearts, you will repay that kindness with information that will destroy them." The woman beside Minji was trembling. Captain Ri noticed. "Are you troubled?" he asked quietly. "No, Comrade Captain." "Good. Because your sister's ration card depends on your performance. Remember that when you feel sympathy for the enemy." Minji was assigned to the 8055th MASH unit, currently operating near the Pusan perimeter. American casualties were flooding in from Chinese attacks that came in waves so massive they overwhelmed defensive positions through sheer numbers. The MASH units were working around the clock, their staff hallucinating from exhaustion, their supplies running dangerously low. Perfect conditions for infiltration. Her cover story was simple and tragically common. Family killed in the fighting. Nowhere to go. Desperate for any work. The Americans had processed thousands of such refugees. She would be one more face in an endless stream of human misery. "You will be contacted every 72 hours, Captain Ri told her during final briefing. A courier will approach you near the supply tents. The recognition phrase is, "Do you have news of the harvest?" You will respond, "The rice crop was poor this year." Then you will provide your intelligence report, concealed in medical supply packaging. "And if I'm discovered by the Americans?" Minji asked. "You claim you were forced by the North Korean army, that you were trying to escape to freedom. You cry. You plead. Americans are sentimental about refugees. They will likely believe you." He leaned closer. "But if we discover you've betrayed the People's Army, your entire family will disappear. Your mother, your younger brother, your grandmother. They will vanish into camps where they will die slowly and painfully. Do you understand?" She understood perfectly. She was a weapon with a trigger pointed at her own family. The next morning, Minji joined a column of refugees heading south. She carried nothing but the clothes on her back and a small bag of rice, standard for displaced civilians. Around her, real refugees wept for real losses. She wept too, but for different reasons. Somewhere ahead, American soldiers were fighting and dying. Soon, she would be among them, offering comfort with one hand while gathering intelligence with the other. She had been transformed from a literature student into something she couldn't name. Not quite a spy. Not quite a traitor. Not quite human. The instructor's words echoed in her mind. "You are not learning to heal. You are learning to harvest." And the most terrible part? She was very, very good at it. American counterintelligence would later estimate that by early 1951, over 5,000 local Korean civilians were working in and around U.S. military medical facilities. The desperate need for translators, assistants, and support staff created a security nightmare impossible to fully control. Each hospital became a potential listening post. Each kind face could hide a hostile intelligence operation. The Americans had no choice. The casualties were too high. The need too urgent. They would take the help they could get and pray their vetting was good enough. It almost never was. Minji walked south toward the 8055th MASH, toward wounded soldiers who would trust her, toward a choice she didn't yet know she would make. The spy who would refuse to spy. The weapon that would not fire. The field hospital shook as another mortar round landed 200 yards out. Private First Class Tommy Chen from Sacramento tried to scream, but the blood filling his lungs wouldn't let him. He was 19. He'd been in Korea for 3 weeks. Minji's hands moved automatically, clearing his airway, applying pressure to the sucking chest wound that was killing him faster than the morphine could dull the pain. She spoke to him in perfect English, the accent her professors at Iowa Women's University had praised before the world ended. "Stay with me, Tommy. Look at my eyes. Just my eyes." This was exactly what Captain Rhee had taught her. Build rapport through crisis. Become their anchor. Make them trust you when they're most vulnerable. Tommy's eyes locked on hers. His lips moved. She leaned closer. "2nd Battalion," he whispered. "7th Marines. We're pushing north tomorrow. Objective Baker. 5 miles past." She held the compress tighter against his chest. The intelligence was perfect. Unit designation, timing, objective. Captain Rhee would call this a textbook extraction. The kind of information that saves North Korean lives and kills Americans. The kind of information she was going to bury. "Shh," she told Tommy. "Don't talk. Save your strength." His hand gripped hers with surprising force. Not the grip of a dying soldier. The grip of a kid from California who thought she was saving his life. Which she was. Just not the way her handlers wanted. By February 1951, the American military faced a numbers problem that made tactical sense, but created catastrophic security risks. The 8055th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital processed an average of 47 critical casualties per day. They had 12 surgeons, 18 nurses, and a support staff designed for peacetime medicine. Do the math. It doesn't work. So they hired locals. Hundreds of them across the Korean theater. Young women who spoke English and claimed medical training. desperate civilians who needed food and protection. And some, like Min Ji, who were something else entirely. The American Counterintelligence Manual from 1951 acknowledged the problem with bureaucratic understatement. Due to operational necessity, medical facilities may employ locally sourced personnel of unknown political affiliation. Enhanced vigilance is recommended. Enhanced vigilance against women who worked 20-hour shifts and held soldiers' hands while they died. Captain Sterling, the 85th chief surgeon, said it differently in a letter home. We know some of them might be communist agents. We also know that without them, good American boys would bleed out on gurneys while we try to do triage alone. So we take the risk and pray we're right. Min Ji understood she was that risk, that prayer, that necessary gamble. 3 days after Tommy Chen whispered his unit's objective, Min Ji met her handler. The contact protocol was simple. A Korean man selling black market cigarettes would approach with the phrase, Captain Ri had drilled into her. Do you have news of the harvest? She was supposed to respond. The yield has been better than expected. The man found her during her break, squatting behind the supply tent where she could close her eyes for 5 minutes before the next wave of wounded arrived. Do you have news of the harvest? Min Ji looked at him. He was maybe 40, with the face of someone who had seen too many interrogations. His eyes didn't blink enough. She should have said the code phrase, should have handed over the intelligence about the 2nd Battalion's push north. Should have mentioned that a lieutenant from the 187th Airborne had let slip that they were planning a major operation near Wonju. Instead, she said in Korean, the harvest failed. The field was empty. The handler's face went blank. Empty? For 12 days? Empty? There was nothing to report. You've had contact with over 60 American soldiers. You expect me to believe? They talk about their mothers, Min Ji interrupted, their girlfriends, their farms in Iowa. That's what dying boys talk about, not military operations. The handler leaned closer. His breath smelled like cheap tobacco and something rotten. Your grandmother in Seoul, he said quietly. She's 83, correct? That's very old. It would be unfortunate if she had an accident. Very unfortunate if your brother was accused of being a reactionary. These things happen when people forget their duty. Min Ji felt the world narrow to a point. This was the leverage Captain Ri had explained. Family as collateral. Love as a weapon. I understand, she said. Then find something to report. By next contact. Or we'll help your memory improve. He left her there, shaking, behind a tent full of bandages and plasma and men who trusted her. That night, Min Ji changed the dressing on a tank commander's burns. His name was Lieutenant Morrison. He was from Georgia, and he wouldn't stop apologizing for screaming during the debridement. It's all right, she told him. Everyone screams. It means you're alive. You got family? Morrison asked through clenched teeth. The question hit like shrapnel. Yes, Min Ji said. A grandmother. A brother. They safe? She focused on cutting away dead tissue. I don't know. Morrison was quiet for a moment, then, my unit's moving to support the push near Wonju. Big operation. Lot of armor rolling north in 3 days. I'm worried I won't heal fast enough to lead my platoon. There it was again. Perfect intelligence. Timing. Location. Force composition. Everything Captain Ri needed. Min Ji wrapped fresh gauze around Morrison's arm. You'll heal, she said. You're strong. How do you do it? Morrison asked. Stay so calm when everything's hell. She didn't have an answer for that. How do you explain that you're calm because you've already accepted damnation? That every bandage you tie, every soldier you save, is just choosing which version of hell you'll inherit. I just do what needs doing, she finally said. Morrison smiled through his pain. Well, you're damn good at it. You ever need anything, you ask for Lieutenant Morrison, 70th Tank Battalion. I owe you my life. She wouldn't report the 70th Tank Battalion's movement. She wouldn't mention Wonju. And Lieutenant Morrison would never know that his trust had just saved his entire platoon from a North Korean ambush that would never happen. By mid-February, Minji had heard enough intelligence to reshape the entire Central Front. She knew the 187th Airborne was preparing a major drop. She knew supply lines for the 2nd Infantry Division were stretched dangerously thin. She knew exact coordinates for artillery positions, casualty rates that revealed unit strength, and the locations of 3 MASH units that would be vulnerable to raids. She reported none of it. Instead, her contacts received useless information. Gossip about officers, complaints about food, the kind of background noise that couldn't hurt anyone, but might convince her handlers she was still trying. It wasn't enough. The American medics started to notice something strange about the Korean woman who worked harder than anyone else but never asked questions. She was too perfect, too dedicated, too careful about what she did and didn't overhear. Corporal Davis, a medic from Detroit, mentioned it to Captain Sterling. "Sir, you ever notice how Kim—" They called her Kim because they couldn't pronounce Minji. "You ever notice how she leaves the tent when officers start talking shop?" Sterling had noticed. "You think she's afraid? Or avoiding something?" "I think she's smart, sir. Smarter than we give her credit for." That conversation happened on February 18th. The same day, Minji received a final warning from her handler. "One more empty report," he told her, "and your grandmother dies. We'll make sure you know it was because of you." Minji nodded. She went back to work. That night, a convoy of wounded arrived from a Chinese ambush near the Imjin River. 47 casualties. 12 critical. The hospital worked through the night in a chaos of blood and shouting and desperate surgery. Minji moved between gurneys like a ghost, doing what no one else had time to do. Holding IVs, applying pressure, whispering calm into the ears of boys who thought they were dying. One of them, a sergeant named Walsh, grabbed her hand as she changed his plasma bottle. "You're Korean, right?" he gasped. "Yes." "Why you helping us? We're not your people." Minji looked at him. Really looked. He had brown eyes like her brother. He was maybe 22. "Because you're hurt," she said simply. That's enough. Walsh passed out before he could respond. But that answer, that impossibly simple answer, was the only truth she had left. She was helping them because they were hurt. Because healing was the only thing that made sense in a world designed for killing. Because every soldier she saved was proof that she was still human, still capable of choice, still more than the weapon Captain Rhee tried to make her. The cost would be catastrophic. She knew that. But some prices are worth paying. The night was supposed to end with morphine and questions. Instead, it ended, with Private Danny Martinez telling her about his mother's tamales. "She makes them every Christmas Eve," Martinez whispered through morphine-clouded pain. His leg shattered from knee to ankle. 300 in one night. The whole neighborhood shows up. Minji changed his bandages with practiced efficiency, her hands steady even as her chest tightened. This was the moment. He was vulnerable, medicated. The lesson from Pyongyang echoed in her memory. They trust you most when they're talking about home. "Your unit must miss you," she said gently. "Where are they now?" Martinez blinked slowly, his eyes focusing somewhere past the tent ceiling. "Second platoons dug in near. He trailed off, then smiled. "Man, I can almost smell those tamales." She could have pressed, could have reminded him of his question, could have extracted the location that Captain Ri Sung-ho needed for tomorrow's artillery coordinates. Instead, she pulled the blanket higher on his chest. "Tell me more about your mother's cooking." Across the tent, Corporal Eddie Davis watched her with narrowed eyes. He'd been watching her for 3 days now, ever since she'd started spending extra time with the patients instead of hovering near the officers' briefings. The numbers told their own story of American desperation. MASH 8055 had authorized positions for 42 medical personnel. They had 27. The February offensive had flooded them with 186 casualties in 72 hours. Every pair of hands mattered, even suspicious ones. Davis had done the math differently. Someone who spoke perfect English and showed up right when they needed translators? Someone who volunteered for extra shifts but avoided the command tent? That wasn't dedication. That was reconnaissance. "You're working late again," Davis said, his tone casual but his posture tense. Minji looked up from Martinez's chart. "Many wounded tonight." "Yeah." Davis stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Funny thing. Captain Sterling was just telling me how the North Koreans hit 3 of our artillery positions last week. Real precise strikes. Almost like someone told them exactly where to aim." Her pulse quickened, but her hands remained steady. "The war is terrible." "It is." Davis's eyes never left her face. "Makes you wonder who you can trust, doesn't it?" Before she could answer, the tent flap burst open. 2 medics carried in a screaming soldier, his uniform soaked in blood from a stomach wound. Captain Sterling rushed in behind them, already shouting orders. "Davis, get her over here!" Sterling pointed at Minji. "I need those hands now." The surgery lasted 4 hours. Minji held retractors, wiped blood from Sterling's forehead, anticipated his needs before he voiced them. The soldier, Sergeant Paul Hendricks of the 23rd Infantry Regiment, had taken shrapnel that shredded his intestines. Sterling worked with brutal efficiency, removing damaged tissue, clamping bleeders, racing against shock and blood loss. "Suction," Sterling snapped. Minji already had it positioned. "More light." She adjusted the overhead lamp with her free hand. When Hendricks finally stabilized, Sterling stepped back and looked at her properly for the first time in hours. His surgical gown was a butcher's apron. His hands trembled with exhaustion. But his eyes held something Minji hadn't seen before: respect. "You're wasted on bandages," he said simply. "I want you in my OR from now on." Davis's expression darkened, but he said nothing. The contact came at 0300 hours, 3 hours after her shift should have ended. Minji was washing surgical instruments in the sterilization tent when the flap opened. The courier was new, younger, with a scar across his left cheek. "Do you have news of the harvest?" he asked in Korean. Her hands stilled in the basin. "The fields have been quiet." The courier's expression hardened. "Captain Rhee requires better intelligence. The last 3 reports were useless." "I work in surgery now. I hear less." "Then hear more." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "Your grandmother's health depends on it. She's quite old. 68, isn't she? Such a fragile age." Minji's fingers clenched around a pair of surgical scissors under the water. One movement, that's all it would take, but the courier smiled, as if reading her thoughts. "If I don't return, your brother joins her. Then your mother. Then you." He pulled a small photograph from his pocket. Her grandmother, standing in their sole courtyard, recent enough that Minji could see the winter cold in the old woman's posture. "This was taken 4 days ago. She asks about you constantly. It would be unfortunate if she stopped asking." He left the photograph on the sterilization table and disappeared into the night. Minji stared at her grandmother's face until her vision blurred. The impossible mathematics of war crystallized around her. Every American life she saved condemned her family further. Every intelligence report she buried pushed them closer to execution. The arithmetic of mercy always came with a bill. She burned the photograph in the sterilization furnace and returned to her tent. Davis was waiting outside. "Late night," he observed, "cleaning instruments." "For 3 hours?" Minji met his gaze steadily. "The surgery was difficult. Everything must be sterilized properly." Davis studied her face in the dim moonlight. Whatever he saw there didn't satisfy him, but he stepped aside. "Captain Sterling wants you at 0600. Big push expected tomorrow. Lots of casualties coming." "I will be ready." As she entered her tent, she heard Davis mutter something to another soldier standing guard. The word asset carried clearly in the cold air. She was being watched by both sides now, trusted by neither. Valuable only as long as she could maintain the impossible balance. The North Koreans wanted intelligence. The Americans wanted healing. Her family wanted survival. Min-ji could only offer one of those things without betraying herself completely. She had chosen healing, and that choice was about to cost her everything. The morning brought exactly what Davis had predicted. 53 casualties from a Chinese night assault on the Wonju corridor. The surgery tent became an assembly line of trauma. Min-ji worked beside Sterling for 11 straight hours, her hands moving with mechanical precision through a blur of torn flesh and shattered bone. A young lieutenant, barely 20, his name tape reading Morrison, grabbed her wrist as she adjusted his IV. "They came out of nowhere," he gasped. "Thousands of them. Bugles blowing. We fell back to grid reference 37 Delta. Whole battalions regrouping there for a counterattack at dawn. Grid reference 3/7 Delta. Battalion strength. Dawn counterattack." The information hung in the air between them, invisible but heavy as artillery shells. Morrison's eyes were already glazing over from morphine. He wouldn't remember telling her. Sterling was 3 tables away, elbow deep in another soldier's chest cavity. No one else had heard. Min-ji squeezed Morrison's hand. "Rest now. You're safe." She filed the intelligence in the same place she'd filed everything else. The dark corner of her mind where tactical information went to die unreported. Tomorrow, Morrison's battalion would launch their counterattack. Captain Rhee would never know it was coming. Americans would live because she chose silence. And somewhere in Seoul, her grandmother was running out of time. The mathematics of war had never felt more brutal. Every American soldier she saved was purchased with a piece of her family's survival. She was spending lives like currency, choosing strangers over blood, and the bill was coming due faster than she could count. The Army Counterintelligence Corps' tent smelled like cigarette smoke and paranoia. Captain James Fletcher studied her across a wooden field table while rain hammered the canvas above. "Park Min-ji." He pronounced her name slowly, incorrectly. "You've been working at this MASH unit for 3 months." "Yes, sir." She kept her hands folded, eyes down. Respectful, submissive, exactly what they expected. "You speak English like you went to college in Boston. My father taught literature, English classics." Fletcher lit another lucky strike. "Your father. Where is he now?" "Dead. North Korean soldiers, June 1950. This was true. Everything she'd told the Americans was true, except for the one thing that mattered. "We've got a problem, Miss Park." Fletcher slid a typed sheet across the table. 3 weeks ago, the 2nd Battalion got hit hard near Wonju. Real hard, like somebody told the Chinese exactly where they'd be regrouping. Her heart hammered, but her face stayed still. 2 weeks before that, an artillery position got overrun. 12 Americans dead. He tapped ash onto the dirt floor. Last week, supply convoy drove straight into an ambush. The tent flap opened. A younger officer entered, Lieutenant Morrison, the same one who'd mentioned Grid 37 Delta 3 days ago while she was changing his bandages. "We've identified 17 Korean civilians working at American medical facilities who are confirmed communist agents," Fletcher continued. 17 that we caught. How many do you think we missed?" Morrison watched her with the flat eyes of a man who'd seen too many friendly faces turn hostile. "I don't know, sir." "Neither do I." Fletcher stubbed out his cigarette. "But I know this. Wounded soldiers talk. They're scared, they're medicated, and they trust the people helping them. That makes every Korean nurse a potential intelligence asset. Some of us just want to help." "I'm sure that's true." Fletcher's voice softened, which somehow made it worse. "The problem is, I can't tell the difference. You could be the most patriotic South Korean in this camp, or you could be reporting to Pyongyang every night. How would I know?" She met his eyes. "You wouldn't." This honesty seemed to surprise him. "You worked 36 hours straight during the Chinese push last week," Morrison said quietly. Captain Sterling said, "You're the best surgical assistant he's ever had. Korean or American? I do my job." "Yeah." Fletcher leaned back. "That's what worries me. You're too good. Your English is too perfect. You never ask the wrong questions, which means you're either exactly who you say you are or you're the best trained operative they've got." Through the canvas walls, she could hear wounded men calling for morphine, for water, for their mothers. Every cry was a reminder of why she'd made her choice. "What do you want from me?" "The truth." Fletcher pulled out a photograph. Her grandmother, standing outside their sole apartment, taken maybe 2 weeks ago. "We intercepted this. It was being couriered to someone in this camp." The world tilted. "The back has a message in Korean. Want me to read it?" Fletcher didn't wait for an answer. "Your family remembers you. They hope you remember them. That's a threat, Miss Park. That's how handlers keep their assets in line." She couldn't speak. "So here's what I think," Fletcher said. "I think you were recruited, probably coerced, by North Korean intelligence. I think they're using your family as leverage. And I think you're smart enough to know that the only thing keeping you alive right now is that I'm not completely sure." Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "Sir," "Shut up, Lieutenant." Fletcher never broke eye contact. "Here's your situation, Miss Park. If you're a spy and I let you walk out of here, American soldiers die. If you're innocent and I arrest you, one more Korean civilian disappears into the system. Either way, somebody loses. So what happens now? Now you tell me the truth. All of it. Because if you are working for them, and you help me understand how their system works, I can protect your family. We've got contacts in Seoul. We can extract people. It was a clever trap. Confess and betray the network. Stay silent and confirm his suspicions. I'm not a spy." Each word cost her something. "I was recruited. They threatened my family. But I never gave them anything that mattered." Fletcher leaned forward. "Define anything that mattered." "I told them about the food, about how Americans treat prisoners, about medical procedures. Nothing tactical. Nothing that could get soldiers killed. And when they asked for tactical information, I lied. I gave them gossip, rumors, things I overheard in the mess tent that meant nothing." Morrison spoke up. "That convoy ambush. Did you report its route?" "No." "The artillery position?" "No." "How about grid 37 Delta?" Morrison's voice went cold. "Did that make it into your reports?" She looked at him directly. "I heard you mention it. While I was changing your bandages. You were half asleep, and you were worried about the men there. But no, Lieutenant. I buried that information the same way I buried everything else that could hurt someone." The silence stretched. "Jesus Christ," Morrison breathed. "You've been sitting on actionable intelligence for months?" "I've been choosing who to betray." Her voice finally cracked. "My handlers threatened my grandmother, my brother. They sent me here to exploit wounded soldiers, and instead, I helped them. So now both sides want me dead. The only question is which one kills me first." Fletcher stubbed out his cigarette. "Why tell me this now?" "Because Lieutenant Morrison is right to suspect me. Because eventually someone will figure it out. And because—" She paused. "Because I'm tired of carrying this alone. Your family is probably already dead." The words came out flat. "That photograph is weeks old. Every empty report I filed moved them closer to execution. I know how this works." Morrison looked at Fletcher. "Sir, if she's telling the truth, she's the bravest person in this camp." Fletcher lit another cigarette. "Or the most convincing liar I've ever met." Outside, an ambulance arrived with fresh casualties from the Imjin River fighting. 37 wounded men who needed immediate surgery. "Captain Sterling is short 2 surgical assistants," she said quietly. "Those men need help now." Fletcher studied her for a long moment. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to work. Lieutenant Morrison here is going to be your shadow. You don't piss without him knowing about it. And if I find out you lied to me, If one more American position gets compromised, I will personally ensure you face a firing squad. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Get out. She stood, legs shaking. Miss Park. Fletcher's voice stopped her at the tent flap. For what it's worth, I hope you're telling the truth. Because if you are, you've saved a lot of American lives. And we, don't forget that. She walked back into the rain, Morrison trailing 3 steps behind. What Fletcher didn't tell her, what he was writing in his report even now, was that they'd intercepted another communication. A North Korean courier had been captured carrying orders to eliminate a female asset at the 8055th MASH. No name, just a description. And it matched her perfectly. The communist handlers had made their decision about her loyalty. Now, an assassin was coming. Someone who could move through the chaos of a field hospital unseen. Someone who knew exactly how to make a death look like a wartime accident. Fletcher crushed his cigarette and reached for the secure telephone. He had maybe 48 hours to decide whether to protect her, use her as bait, or let whatever was coming arrive unimpeded. In the calculus of war, one suspected double agent didn't matter much. But Captain Sterling would be furious if he lost his best surgical assistant. The vial arrived wrapped in surgical gauze, nestling in a small cardboard box with a single half-melted ice pack. A handwritten label bore only a name. There was no return address and no instructions. I slit the tape, unwound the gauze, and found a clear glass vial. The liquid inside unnervingly still. I turned it over, searching for a clue, and understood that whatever it was had been meant to arrive without explanation. The artillery shell hit at 0447 hours, punching through the canvas and tearing a jagged rent that threw up a spray of dirt and splinters. The tent collapsed over the cots. Someone screamed, then coughing filled the air as men scrambled to drag the wounded into the gray, smoke-streaked dawn. Please paste the chapter text you want cleaned. I don't see any chapter text. Please paste the chapter you want cleaned, and I will remove headings, chapter numbers, and extraneous commentary. Please paste the chapter text you want cleaned. I will remove leading trailing headings, chapter numbers, and extraneous commentary, and return only the cleaned chapter text. If the text is truncated, I'll tie it off cleanly. Please paste the chapter text you want cleaned. I will remove leading trailing headings, chapter numbers, and extraneous commentary, and return only the cleaned chapter text. Please provide the chapter text you want cleaned.